On March 12th, NC State was a 10 seed in the ACC tournament, narrowly sneaking by Louisville. Today, they are in the Final Four for the first time since 1983. March Madness at its finest.
Locked On Podcast Network presents the 2024 NCAA Bracket Breakdown. Presented by Nissan.
What is up, folks? Happy Sunday night or Monday morning. Welcome in to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade, and you are joining us after the conclusion of the Elite Eight matchups. We officially have a Final Four teams set. I want to thank all of you out there for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Also remind you can listen to this show ad-free on Amazon Music. Definitely check it out there if you have not done so yet. Also, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball, folks, it's brought to you by Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Isaac, we're going to get into, of course, the two matchups to get us down to the Final Four. NC State taking down Duke. We'll also talk about the incredible high-level basketball played in that Purdue-Tennessee game to start us off on Sunday here on Easter Sunday. Also want to give a shout-out to Ben Miller. He is leading the bracket challenge here for Locked On College Basketball. We had a bracket challenge through our Discord channel. You can definitely join the Discord channel if you have not done so yet. There's a link in the show notes. Ben has a 96th percentile for his bracket, 780 points. Shout out to him. His champion is not in it anymore, so we'll see if he holds on to that lead. But bracket is in much better shape than mine. I don't need to get into the details of where my bracket is. I'm assuming, Isaac, you don't want to either, so we can just
look. I don't mind saying I've got no teams left, Andy. I'm done and out. So
I got UConn left. That is it. As I'm thinking about it right now, I got UConn left, so I'm gonna hold my hat on that. But let's start with this ACC battle. This is the first time in NCAA tournament history that an 11 seed has beat a 4 seed, which sounds crazy, but I guess it's not that weird that just of all the combinations of seeds that can match up in the Elite Eight, probably doesn't happen all that often. When it does, you don't typically expect the 11 seed to win, but here that was the situation. NC State, like I said at the opening, a team that was in 10th place in the ACC, that had legitimately 0.0 at-large hopes, none at all. They were not making this tournament unless they won 5 games in a row. They won 5 games in a row. Now they are cruising all the way into the Final Four, first time since Jimmy V in 1983. An extraordinary, incredible story that I think is maybe it's getting a lot of love, and we've talked about it a few times already, Isaac, of like, it's not a plucky mid-major team that you typically see as that 11 seed that goes to the Final Four, like we've seen with VCU and George Mason and others, like, because it's a program that has more notoriety. I think it's maybe getting downplayed a little bit, but this is an extraordinary story. And if this was your first time watching them this year, I think folks are starting to see why this story is so fun, because this team is so enthusiastic and they seem to have so much fun, and the style is fun to watch, and like it's a really fun story, and was an enjoyable watch for basically everybody who watched this game, outside of course Duke fans, who certainly did not enjoy watching that second half.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, I love that about this NC State team is like DJ Burns would be the belle of the ball just because of who he is, but this dude is out here just having a blast playing this game that we all love. And that makes it all the more fun, right? Like, I've been calling it the DJ show because, I mean, legitimately, the two of them, DJ Burns and DJ Horne, combined for 49 of NC State's 76 points in this game, Andy. And then, I mean, not that other guys weren't contributing. Everybody that played scored for NC State. But it's just, this is the first time where, and I know this is me now taking us into the game, which we can zoom back out if we need to. But as I'm saying it, I'm realizing we've been talking about that Achilles heel we expected for Duke to be that 5 position. And as we talked about on Friday night after they beat Houston, they had risen to the challenge. But as has been the case now in the 3 times they've played NC State, Duke had absolutely no answers for DJ Burns.
No, and he was absolutely excellent in the second half of this game. And we saw NC State won this game. They won this game with offensive execution. They won this game by doing what they needed to do. DJ Burns and DJ Horne, like you said, had great games. But Duke also seemed to kind of lose their identity a bit in the second half. There was very little ball movement. It was a lot of Jared McCain just throwing up shots. Now, he had a great game, but there was very little help outside of that. Kyle Filipowski fouled out with 5 minutes to go. Even before he fouled out, he had 11 points. He did not shoot it well at all in this game. And defensively, Duke they were trying to press, but they didn't seem comfortable pressing. And so what resulted was a lot of really easy baskets for NC State on the other end. They got out in transition. Middlebrooks had, I think, 2 wide open lay-ins.
That's right.
There was nobody he would have been offsides by like 15 feet if this was a soccer. He was way behind the defense, and they didn't seem to know that he was there. There was at least 2 possessions that I'm remembering, maybe even 3, where Burns was basically isolated because of out in transition because of the press defense, and got and one calls against Sean Stewart or somebody from Duke. And it was just like, you're trying to come back in this game. If you're Duke, McCain hits a 3, you get it within 10, and then 5 seconds later, DJ Burns is scoring on the other end. Like, that just cannot happen if you're Duke. And I think, again, it was obviously some issues for Duke and for Shire, and I think that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how the heck did we let this happen. But at the same time, for Kevin Keats and for the Wolfpack to have found ways to exploit the mismatches here, to get the ball into positions to score, and to play good enough defense that the only player who hurt them was probably their best NBA prospect in McCain, or second best behind Filipowski, who, like we said, had a bad game.
So. Oh, that's a fun conversation we need to have at some point.
I leaf on to talk about that. I think Flip's still probably higher on the mocks, but McCain, he did himself a lot of favors with his performance here tonight. But just a game where Duke really seemed to kind of lose what got them to this point, and it was a huge advantage for NC State to get to where they are now.
Well, and Andy, what's funny is Duke had that advantage in the first half, when I think the word I used to you in our texting was discombobulated, where NC State just seemed incapable of running their offense. I mean, it was out of sorts. It was out of sync. 21 points in the first half for the Wolfpack. And a lot of that, let's be fair, is because DJ Burns is sitting on the bench. And so often he is the facilitator for this offense. Now, I know in this game, he didn't have the 7 assists that he had the other night, just 3 in this game, but still they had nothing. And then flipped at halftime, with all due respect to Kyle, like, Andy, what's so nuts is to go from 27-21 at halftime, and NC State has 55 points in the second half, where they're just going off. And what's crazy, folks, a little peek behind the curtain here, is I had to go to a family Easter dinner basically at halftime of this game, come back, finish it, and then now we're hopping in. But so NC State fans, you're welcome for me going away. I think I unjinxed them by doing that. But the thing is, Andy, what I saw from the Wolfpack in the first 20 minutes, I was shook and shocked to see what I saw in the second half, because that was 2 completely different teams. And I wonder if at any level, the experience and the veteran depth that Kevin Keats has brought in through the transfer portal versus what Duke has on their roster. They got a couple guys coming back and Jeremy Roach and all that, but still do rely on several younger guys. Thinking about McCain and Stewart and not Mark Mitchell, whoever it is I was just trying to think of. But Andy, you just wonder, does that factor into some of these? Does John Shire being such a young coach factor into some of those changes or lack thereof? It's hard to know.
Yeah. And I think another interesting fact that we can get to a little bit more, why this might be and what it means for the future matchup. But these 2 teams that won today, NC State and Purdue, they made a combined 6 3-pointers. That's it. In an era where 3-point shooting seems to have really increased in value, kind of, as college basketball sort of trails the NBA in that regard, 3 3-pointers for each team. Purdue made 3, NC State made 3. It's more of an anomaly for Purdue, believe it or not, even though Zach Edey, and we'll get to that, had an incredible, extraordinary game. But Purdue's an elite 3-point shooting team. They were going up against a great defense, and they managed to win without needing that 3-point shot. But I think it's notable that you had 2 teams that won without really relying on that 3-point shot. Meanwhile, Duke, they took a whole bunch of them. And Jared McCain made 5 of them, and everybody else on Duke combined to make 0. no other 3-point shots made by the Blue Devils in this game. So I think we've talked about it already. We talked about it a little bit with BYU, and we've talked about it with a few other teams. But teams that are overly reliant on the 3-point shot, it can lead you all the way where you need to go, but one bad night can really throw you off. And for Purdue to do this, for NC State to do this, for UConn to have also only made 3-pointers in their game, like that is a really unique set of circumstances that put all three of these teams into the Final Four without really relying on the shot that we kind of consider to be one of the most rising areas of importance in college basketball.
It's so wild. And Andy, as we kind of put a bow on this and prepare to move to the first game of the day, let's remember, you said it about NC State skating by Louisville in the ACC tournament. And then they needed Isaac McNeely from Virginia to miss a free throw to lead to the Michael O'Connell like miracle prayer banked 3-pointer to send that game to regulation where they beat Virginia. To even like, there's just all of those, what would we like butterfly effect moments where Andy, it's just completely, absolutely bonkers. And it almost makes you feel how destined might this team be. And I know you look at what's ahead and you think how juggernaut it seems like it would be. But Andy, if they knocked off Purdue and UConn in Phoenix next weekend, like, I'm sorry, Kemba Walker, that trumps what you did, my friend. Yeah. So we're going to have all of those conversations this week, I'm sure. But Andy, just thinking about the magnitude of this thing, like what they've done already is enough. NC State could get blitzed by Purdue on Saturday, and what they've just done and accomplished, winning the ACC tournament and making it to the Final Four, that is enough. Well, all right, gang. Speaking of that being enough, Purdue's quest to pull a Virginia continued thanks to a massive performance from Zach Edey on Sunday that will be remembered for decades. We'll talk about that right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. That Final Four is Saturday in Phoenix, and maybe you're an NC State fan and you weren't planning on going, but now you got to get there. We can't help you with airfare or hotels, but getting into the games, Game Time has got you covered. And maybe your team is out and you've given up on the tournament. That's fine and moved on, because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, like their last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, comedy, concerts, theater, and more. Killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Andy, I often kind of worry about my tickets maybe like being bogus when I buy from a third-party site. But with Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I absolutely love that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Andy, we've talked about how NC State made it to the Final Four for the first time since 1983. Well, not to be outdone, Purdue hadn't been there since 1980, and now Andy Patton, they are going back. Tennessee seeking their first ever Final Four, still just can't quite get over that hump. I truly believe they will someday, but it was not this day. And so, Andy, a kind of big picture storyline question before we even get into the game. Do you agree or disagree that this is already redemption achieved for Purdue, regardless of what happens Saturday? Like, are you at a place where, as we just said about NC State, just getting to Phoenix is enough to not make us forget about, but offset last season, even if they don't end up ultimately pulling a Virginia?
Personally, yes. But I'm not sure that narrative will fully go away, in particular because of who they are now playing. And I don't think this is fair, and I don't agree with this necessarily. But if Purdue loses to NC State, I think that some parts of that narrative will continue for this team. And again, it's not fair. Purdue does not control that they're playing an 11-seeded team in NC State. But and I saw this kind of floating around on Twitter, on social media, Purdue has lost to a double-digit seed 3 years in a row. If they lose to NC State, it would be fourth. Obviously, the situation is so unbelievably, dramatically different than losing to a 16 seed in the first round. Like, they're not even, it's apples and peanut butter. Like, they're not even comparable in any way, shape, or form. But it matters that's who. If they're playing Houston, I think we would say yes. It doesn't matter now. If they lose to Houston, they have exercised those demons from last year. The redemption story is over. But the fact that they're playing NC State, and I will reiterate this. It is not necessarily the opinion that I share, but I think the narrative around the team, if they lose to NC State, won't fully go away. I think they'll have like kind of repaired it in some ways, but I think some of the criticism about Matt Painter will still exist if they lose to a team that really wasn't expected to even be in this tournament in NC State. Fair or not fair, that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with that take, and I know we'll talk about it, I'm sure, a lot this week, so let's not belabor that so we can get to the game itself. For those who hadn't processed this was a rematch of Maui matchups from back in November for the second straight game. And in fact, in the exact same order, Purdue had started with Gonzaga, then played Tennessee. And wildly enough, if Marquette had won through, they would match up in the Final Four. And that would have been Purdue literally going through the exact same 3 games in the exact same order as Maui. Andy, that would have been one of the most trippy March Madness things I think ever. Now, the big picture topic and talking point for this game coming in was you've got 2 of your National Player of the Year Naismith finalists in Zach Edey, who's going to win it, and Dalton Knecht, but who is right there, arguably like any, you take Zach Edey out and it's either probably Knecht or RJ Davis, but Jamal Shad certainly. Anyway, Andy, you want stars to show up in big time moments. And boy, did these guys in a massive, massive way. Let me give this stat and then I'll get your thoughts on this unreal performance from these 2 men. Per ESPN Stats and Info, quote, this is the first game in the NCAA tournament history in which both teams had a single player score at least half its points. Andy, that is bonkers. What exactly did we get to witness Dalton Knecht and Zach Edey do on Sunday?
It's funny when we previewed this game, like neither of us were going to stand up and say, hey, I think that this is going to happen, this unreal thing that has never happened before. But like, it's also not that shocking when you look at how these teams match up with each other. Tennessee is obviously a phenomenal defensive team. Frankly, they are both phenomenal defensive teams, but they have areas of weakness. And Tennessee, they don't have a ton of huge size. Like Jonas Aidoo is a good player, but he doesn't match up physically with Zach Edey. Granted, there's not really anybody in the league. The only person who might have the chance of matching up with Zach Edey is very likely, or at least potentially, who they will face in the championship in Donovan Clingan. But Tennessee was unable to match up with Edey in that way, and Purdue didn't have anybody who really was going to be a good matchup for Dalton Knecht. And that's what bared out in this game. I mean, Zach Edey dropped a 40-burger. He had 40 and 16 in this game on 13 of 21 shooting. He sat out for 33 seconds in this game. You remember a couple of years ago, the narrative around Zach Edey was, yeah, he's good, but he's only going to play 18, 20, 22 minutes a game. And he wasn't playing all that much next to Trevion Williams. And now he's playing 39 and a half minutes in an Elite Eight game and dropping 40. Like, it's just an insane growth for him and his ability to be the level of athlete that he needs to be. Everybody says, oh, he's cement foot. He doesn't move well in space, whatever. He did exactly what he needed to do in this game, and he did a good job of avoiding fouls. And I know that the foul conversation is the conversation that people want to have, how he's officiated, how the other team is officiated against him. Tennessee was one of the most foul-prone teams in the country coming into this game, so them committing a bunch of fouls was not out of the ordinary.
Which they did in both halves. Like, Andy, they had like 6 Purdue was in the bonus like 5 minutes into each half. So.
Yeah. I mean, Tennessee has a fouling problem. Like, that was an issue coming in, and it kind of seemed like it was going to be a problem in this game. But for him to do what he did, he finishes with both hands. He can pass out of those double teams. And look, Purdue didn't shoot it well in this game, but they didn't need to. And then for Dalton Knecht, I mean, he just went absolutely insane. Like, he's such a good shooter. He's such a gifted scorer. He's good at finding the angles and getting to where his spots are. And again, Purdue starts 3 guards who are, none of them are really within even 3 inches of Dalton Knecht size-wise. He's just so big and strong, and he just had an absolutely fantastic performance. This was a game of two individuals just showing why they belong in that conversation as the top two players in the country. And with respect to RJ Davis, with respect to Jamal Shed, and acknowledging that tournament performance doesn't necessarily supersede regular season performance, these two guys looked exactly like the two best players in the country in this game. And it's really hard for me to argue against that after seeing this game.
Yeah, Andy, I love that we not only got this matchup, but that they both rose to the occasion. And if Dalton Knecht isn't the poster child for the good side of the portal, which needs to be a big time offseason conversation for us, but I'm just so pleased for him. I'm just so pleased for what his performance has meant for Tennessee this year. And let's quickly talk about that side of it, because you just hate this for Rick Barnes and this team.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep getting so close to that edge. The mix seemed just right this year to finally get up over the hump. But unfortunately, they just ran into the National Player of the Year. I mean, you got to think, like, had Tennessee been in the South bracket or the West bracket, they're the Final Four representative. Yeah. It's just kind of the way the bracket breaks apart, or doesn't sometimes. And unfortunately for Tennessee, it didn't break in their favor in this game.
No, and rebounding was the big thing. I mean, obviously the free throws was the big thing, but 47-26. That's a rebounding advantage for Purdue in this game. I mean, that's a bigger than a Zach Edey size rebounding advantage for Purdue. That ultimately did them in, but really great season for them. Tough to see it end the way that it did. But again, one of these two coaches was going to go home just short of making it to that elusive Final Four. It ended up being Barnes, but a big shout out to Matt Painter for kind of getting off that schneid and being in the position he's in right now.
Andy, one of my favorite things about the game was the trading off of the 15-2 runs at the end of the first half. We'd had that really tight beginning of the game, and then they trade those runs going into halftime. It's like, dude, this second half could be epic. And man, we were treated today.
We were absolutely treated, and we got treated to Zach Edey swatting Dalton Knecht at the rim in the final minutes of the game. It just felt like this clash of titans, and it kind of ended in a heroic way for Edey. It was a narrative that I'm not even sure Disney could write. It just turned out perfectly for those Purdue fans and for Edey to kind of continue to do what he has done. And now they got a chance to potentially keep going. Like we said, they're going to play an 11 seed. They're going to play DJ Burns and NC State, and Zach Edey and DJ Burns, folks. It's not the matchup we expected. Not even close to the matchup that we expected we'd be seeing in the Final Four. But Isaac, it could be a legitimate instant classic in the same way that these two games were instant classics already. And we're going to discuss that. After I tell you that today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Folks, Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. And Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV to provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's March Madness or the beginning of the MLB season, you're going to want to have yourself a Fire TV. And I have Amazon Fire Sticks on literally every single TV in my house because I love the layout. I love the user experience. I also love the remote. It's super handy. It has little buttons that take you directly to Prime Video, Disney, Netflix, and Hulu. Fire TV also recently created Fire TV channels, which deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, including Locked On. You can go find all of our Locked On shows over there. Not to mention they have great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Amazon Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't done so yet, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, .com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, Isaac, we're going to close out the show today talking a bit about this Purdue-NC State matchup. But again, we're going to have a lot more coverage about this matchup and, of course, UConn-Alabama coming up this week as we get ready for those games tipping off on Saturday. Also want to talk about the seed aggregate here. The final number is 17, being carried quite heavily by the 11-seeded NC State Wolfpack. That is the 7th highest. The lowest was in 2008 when it was just 4. The highest is 26 back in 2011. Also, shout out to a very balanced conference representation in our Final Four. We got 4 conferences represented: the Big East and UConn, of course, the SEC and Alabama, the Big Ten for Purdue, and the ACC, the team we all expected to represent out of the ACC and NC State. So 4 of the 5 power conferences, 6 if you count the Pac-12. With no Big 12 team, which I think is definitely something that we may not have been expecting at the beginning of the season or even throughout the season, as the Big 12 was a very dominant conference during the year. But fun to see that kind of balance coming into this tournament here, as we get some really intriguing matchups between UConn and Bama, which we talked about on yesterday's show, and now this matchup between Purdue and NC State.
Yeah, Andy, it's going to be a super fun matchup. It's so wild. Like you were talking about earlier when you were talking about the game with all of the lack of 3-point shooting. It's like we expect to see that go back up because both of these two teams do that so well, as you talked about, with Purdue being just right up there at the top in 3-point percentage. And I have, as someone who follows closely the ACC, I feel like I've spent a lot of my college basketball season saying things like, this team has nothing that can stop DJ Burns. This team has nothing for DJ Burns. DJ Burns can eat this team for lunch, whatever I want to say, right? For perhaps the first time, or one of the only few times this season, I get to say, this team has somebody that can not only match DJ Burns, but is bigger than him, at least from a height standpoint. I don't have their weights off the top of my head right now, but Andy, I like clear it out, get everyone else out to the 3-point line, and let's let these dudes just go to work next Saturday, right?
I think so. And I'm curious how effective Burns will be able to be against Edey offensively. Well, on both ends of the floor. I think he's going to struggle defensively because who has not struggled defensively to defend Zach Edey this year? But offensively, Burns, he uses really good footwork. He uses good leverage and angles. He can also kind of fade away. Like a lot of the shots that DJ Burns makes are ugly. I think that's the best way to put it. And being able to make ugly shots around the rim is kind of a recipe for success against Zach Edey. And we talk about Edey and the foul situation. Part of the reason Edey doesn't pick up a lot of fouls is because he's smart about not picking up dumb fouls. What I think could potentially happen in this game is Burns will be able to get some of that leverage, get some of those angles and spots he wants, and will go up for shots where Edey knows if he tries to defend it, if he tries to block the shot or use his arms or body to get in front of that shot, he's going to get called for a foul. And so I think there's going to be opportunities where he may not do that, and that may allow Burns to be able to score on him more effectively than, we haven't really seen any bigs score on him effectively at least not in this tournament. Tennessee doesn't have bigs who really do that. That's not on their team. Graham Ike scored over the top of him a very few times in that game. I don't think Great Osibor did particularly well against him in the round of 32 games. So I think Burns has a better chance to be effective offensively than anybody else we have seen. But I am very intrigued how that's going to work because Burns is also, as you've alluded to a few times, a very good facilitator. And I think if they can use him in that way, where they have him post up further away from the rim, put Edey, pull Edey away from the rim and have Burns facilitate, hit cutters, whatever it may be. I'm curious if they do that, if Matt Painter will make an adjustment and will put Kaufman-Renn on Burns and let Edey kind of roam around the middle a little bit more, which is probably what I would do as a coach in that situation, because I think Burns could potentially neutralize him by pulling him away from the rim. So there's a lot of intrigue to this matchup. We didn't even get into the guard matchups, which I think are going to be fascinating as well, with O'Connell and Smith and Morcell and everybody. It's going to be a fun game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that could be a place where NC State finds some advantage to maybe try to work at mitigating Zach Edey, as if they can hit from outside. But I think aside from Lance Jones, that NC State might be the more athletic backcourt. And obviously as crafty, like, let me take nothing away from Braden Smith or Fletcher Lawyer. These dudes are so incredibly crafty, but I do think that NC State might be able to game plan to, as you're kind of alluding to there, take advantage with their guards. Yeah.
Quick transfer portal update here before we get out and we get you ready for the rest of the week leading up to these Final Four games. Riley Kugel commits to the Jayhawks. Isaac, this is a huge transfer portal addition for Bill Self. And Riley Kugel didn't perform at the level that a lot of people expected of him. He was kind of this trendy breakout pick for Florida as a sophomore this season. A lot of guys had him on the NBA draft radar. He ended up finishing with 9.2 points per game on the year, but kind of fell out of favor in Golden's rotation. They relied more on Walter Clayton and Will Richard and others. And now he hits the portal. He immediately transfers to Kansas. I mean, he was in the portal for like barely a weekend before he committed to Kansas. Kansas obviously lose McCullough. They're going to probably lose Johnny Furphy to the NBA. We'll see what happens with Marco Jackson. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if Nick Timberlake has any eligibility left, but regardless, Puga's going to come in and play a role right away for Bill Self's team. And I think he's going to be I think we've already seen potentially one of the biggest transfer portal additions just in terms of what kind of impact he's going to have in Lawrence next year.
Yep, Andy, 100%. A couple others to mention really quick. Omaha Billieu from Iowa State, who we thought would be their most dynamic freshman ahead of the season, was not. That was our man, Momcilovic. He was an absolute dude, but Billieu, former McDonald's All-American, didn't really get much action for the Cyclones. He is in the transfer portal along with, we knew Doug McDaniel is in the transfer portal from Michigan. He's checking out a little visit with Kansas State. Andy, going to be really interesting there, because we've seen what Jerome Tang's been able to do with the likes of Marquise Noel and Tyler Perry. So could Doug McDaniel be next in line? They're trying to live up to apparently Steve Forbes in Wake Forest and getting some transfer guards there. Folks, that's going to wrap it up. The Final Four is set. Hard to believe we are just 3 games left in the entire college basketball season. 2 Final Four games on Saturday, and then the big kahuna next Monday night. Way too late. Go ahead and get you a nap in right now to prepare for that one. Always so fun chatting. Thanks to all of you who are tuning in. Andy, I'm loving what's going on in the chat right now. All the angst about the free throw shooting and fouls called. I love it. We got Vols fans and Purdue fans. It's getting wonderful in there. So folks, thanks for keeping it spicy while we're in here hanging out and talking. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, you need to come be part of that, where we're talking this kind of stuff all day long. The link's in the show notes. It's free to join. We'd love to have you. If you're not subscribed to our show, you can do so on audio and video. If you're watching on YouTube right now, just hit that subscribe button right now while you're here. And also hit the bell so that you get notified when we go live, like next Saturday after those 2 games are over. Oh, man, couple things we always got to say, Andy Patton. Apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until next time, peace.